Why was a 13-year-old girl sitting alone on cold concrete, while the rest of the world kept laughing? Morning wind swept through the chain-link fence outside Hickory Creek Middle School, carrying the dry scent of October leaves and cafeteria grease. Lily Mae Crawford sat on the back steps beside the gymnasium, her paper bag lunch untouched, the apple inside bruised from the ride on the school bus. Her dark hair fell forward like a curtain as she read the same paragraph in her book for the third time, trying to disappear into its pages. The noise of the schoolyard shouts, sneakers, laughter blurred into something distant, like a radio she'd stopped listening to long ago. At 13, Lily had already mastered the art of smallness. It wasn't something taught, more like something inherited, an instinct for survival in a world that mistook quiet for weakness. Her father once told her that silence can be armor, but silence, she was learning, could also become a target. The boys approached the way storms do, slow, gathering energy, invisible until they were suddenly everywhere. Jackson Whitfield's sneakers scuffed the pavement, perfectly white Nikes that had never seen a scuff mark. Behind him, his two shadows, Tyler Brooks and Mason Campbell, followed with the casual cruelty of those who knew they'd never be punished for anything. Reading again, Crawford. Jackson's voice sliced through the air like a blade through fabric. You think hiding behind a book makes you smarter than everyone. Lily didn't look up. She learned that acknowledgement only fed the fire. Just leave me alone, Jackson. Or what? His laugh carried confidence he hadn't earned. You'll tell your dad, he smirked. Oh wait, he's never here. That landed hard. The boys knew what she feared most, that maybe her father didn't think about her when he was halfway across the world, somewhere hot and violent, somewhere where people didn't come home. Lily closed her book. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tucked it into her bag. She rose slowly, her small frame straight but shaking. I said leave me alone. Tyler stepped in front of her, broad shoulders blocking the path. Jackson's talking to you. It's rude to walk away. Her voice came out thin, quiet, tired. I need to get to class. Mason shoved her shoulder, not hard enough to leave a mark, but enough to make her stumble. Maybe if your dad cared, he'd be here, Mason sneered, instead of playing soldier in some desert no one cares about. Something inside Lily snapped. It was subtle, a flash behind the eyes, a tightening of the jaw, a line crossed in silence. My dad's not playing. Her voice was low but steady now. He's a ranger. He's protecting people like you who don't even deserve it. Jackson put a hand to his chest, mock fear in his eyes. Oh no, her dad's a ranger. What's he gonna do, fly back from Syria and scold us? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Kids gathered, drawn to cruelty like moths to light. Some laughed, some just watched. No one helped. Lily's friend, Aisha Thompson, stood at the edge, clutching her violin case, eyes wide with worry. But she didn't move. Not yet. Just stop, Lily said, voice shaking. You don't know anything about him. Jackson leaned closer, lowering his tone. I know he left you. My mom says soldiers like him use deployments as excuses. Broken people running from broken homes. Guess he couldn't stand being around you either. The flame inside Lily turned to fire. Take it back, she whispered. Or what? He challenged, grin widening. You'll cry, call your grandma. The laughter became a wall, faces blurred into colors. The world shrank to Jackson's smirk. My dad's killed terrorists, she said, quiet, deliberate, each word a bullet. He saved lives, and when he gets back and finds out what you've done, he'll make you pay for every single word. The silence that followed was immediate and heavy. Jackson blinked, his smirk faltering for half a second before morphing into something more dangerous, calculation. Did everyone hear that? He said loudly, turning toward the crowd. She just threatened me, said her dad's gonna make me pay. That's a terrorist threat, right? Tyler raised his phone, grinning. Got it on video. He didn't, not the bullying, not the taunts. Just her words, stripped of every reason they existed. "I didn't threaten anyone," Lily stammered. "You said your terrorist dad would make us pay," Mason interrupted, hands raised like a bad actor in a school play. "I feel unsafe." The laughter came again, softer now, uneasy. A mob realizing it had gone too far but unable to stop. "Let's go tell Principal Whitfield," Jackson declared, puffing his chest, "before she gets someone hurt." Aisha finally reached Lily's side, voice shaking but defiant. "That's not what happened and you know it." "Stay out of it, Thompson," Jackson shot back. "This is about Crawford threatening us with military violence." The bell rang, and just like that the crowd dissolved, vanishing into classrooms and hallways, leaving Lily standing on the cracked pavement, tears burning behind her eyes. It was over, but something inside her had changed. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was something worse, visible in all the wrong ways. When the intercom called her name during history class, she already knew what waited on the other side of the principal's door. "Lily Crawford, report to Principal Whitfield's office immediately." 23 pairs of eyes turned toward her. She kept her head down, packing her books with trembling hands. Ms. Rodriguez gave her a soft look, the kind that said she knew but couldn't help. The walk to the office felt like walking through molasses, slow, heavy, inevitable. The secretary, Mrs. Hayes, looked up from her computer. "Honey, what's going on? Jackson came in here 20 minutes ago with quite a story." Before Lily could answer, the door opened. Principal Margaret Whitfield stood framed in the doorway. Perfect suit, perfect posture, the face of authority without empathy. "Miss Crawford, inside." The office smelled like perfume and power. Diplomas lined the wall behind a massive desk. Jackson sat in one of the chairs, his mother's reflection in smaller, smirking form. Deputy Marcus Hayes, the school's resource officer, stood by the window, arms folded. His uniform creased but his expression unreadable. Principal Whitfield didn't waste time. "We have a zero-tolerance policy regarding threats of violence. What you said constitutes a terroristic threat under Arkansas state law." "I didn't threaten anyone," Lily said. "They were bullying me, they said." "Enough!" Whitfield's tone snapped like a whip. "Multiple witnesses heard you say your father would make them pay. Given that your father is military personnel trained in violence, such a statement is extremely concerning." Deputy Hayes shifted slightly. "Principal Whitfield, maybe we should hear Lily's version." "The video is clear," she interrupted, swiping on her tablet. The short clip played, the edited version beginning exactly where Lily's anger boiled over. Out of context, it looked damning. A furious girl threatening classmates with her father's rank. "That's not fair," Lily whispered. "That's not what happened." "The evidence speaks for itself," Whitfield said, signing a form already waiting on her desk. "Lily Mae Crawford, you are suspended for 5 days pending disciplinary review. You'll also undergo psychological evaluation before returning to school." The words landed like stones. Suspended, psychological evaluation. Her throat tightened. "You're not listening. I didn't do anything wrong." "What you did," Whitfield said coolly, "was invoke military violence to intimidate other students. That behavior is unacceptable." Jackson glanced sideways, a hint of triumph flickering in his eyes. "You see the fear your threats caused," Whitfield continued, gesturing toward her son. "This is why we have policies to protect innocent students." "Innocent." The word burned. Deputy Hayes exhaled quietly, then stepped forward. "Come on, Lily, let's get your things." They walked the hallway in silence. Her shoes squeaked faintly against the waxed floors. The air smelled like cleaning products and fear. "This isn't right," Hayes said softly. "I know Jackson and I know his kind." "It doesn't matter," Lily replied, shoving her books into her bag. "Nobody cares what's true." Outside, her grandmother's old Ford Taurus idled by the curb, coughing smoke. Inside sat Grace Crawford, 71 years old, silver hair pinned neatly, eyes that had seen more pain than most could bear. "Get in, baby." Her voice carried the softness of southern hills and the steel of someone who'd buried too many loved ones. Lily climbed in, her bag heavy on her lap. They drove in silence, passing faded houses and waving neighbors who had no idea what had just happened. "You want to tell me what really happened?" Grace finally asked. And Lily did everything. When she finished, her grandmother's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "That woman," Grace said quietly, "has hated military families since her brother came home from Afghanistan broken. She blames all of us for what he became." The old tourist turned onto Pine Street. Their small yellow house waited at the end, porch sagging but still standing, like everything Grace had ever built, tired but unbroken. Inside, the air smelled of peppermint and fried butter. Grace set the skillet on the stove. "You hungry?" "I'm not." "You'll eat anyway. Can't fight injustice on an empty stomach." The butter hissed in the pan, the bread toasted golden. Normal sounds in an unnormal day. "They want me to take a psychological test," Lily said softly. "You don't need a test," Grace replied. "You need justice." Lily managed a faint smile through tears. "Your daddy didn't raise a quitter," her grandmother said, placing the sandwich on a chipped plate. "And neither did I." The world outside might have been spinning out of control. But in that kitchen, with the sound of a skillet cooling on the stove and the smell of home filling the air, something stronger than anger began to grow inside Lily Crawford. Resolve. By nightfall, her grandmother had made 3 phone calls, to the school board, to the pastor, and to the VFW hall. The old communication lines of small-town America flickered back to life. And as darkness settled over Hickory Creek, a letter waited on Lily's desk, postmarked from Syria, written in a familiar, messy hand. She opened it carefully. "Sweet Lily May, I know it's hard with me gone so much, but you come from a long line of fighters, not people who start fights, but people who stand up when standing up matters. 6 more weeks and I'll be home. Stay strong. I love you beyond measure." Lily folded the letter slowly, pressing it to her chest. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. She didn't know it yet, but by the time her father came home, the whole country would know her name. And Hickory Creek would never be the same again. Why did one shaky video from a middle school courtyard suddenly capture the attention of an entire nation? Morning came cold and blue over Hickory Creek, Arkansas. Frost laced the yellowed grass, the kind that crackles underfoot when you step too hard. Inside the small Crawford home, the old coffee maker gurgled and hissed, filling the kitchen with the smell of burnt grounds and endurance. Grace Crawford stood by the window, hand wrapped around her chipped mug, watching her granddaughter's reflection in the glass. Lily hadn't slept. The shadows under her eyes looked older than her 13 years. On the table beside her phone, numbers climbed faster than either of them could comprehend. 47,000 views, 3,000 comments. By the time the sun cleared the trees, the whole town had already seen it. The full video, unedited, unmanipulated, posted by Aisha Thompson at midnight, spreading through veterans, Facebook groups, military family pages, and parenting forums before the local news even woke up. It showed everything. Jackson's voice, the taunts, the way his friends circled like sharks, the words that cut into Lily's chest like knives. And then her breaking point. Her father's name, her defense, her dignity. When the video ended, there was no mistaking what people had seen. Not a violent child, a cornered one. Not a threat, a daughter pushed too far. "Baby, you need to eat something," Grace said quietly, breaking the silence. Lily didn't answer. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the endless feed. Thousands of strangers were commenting, soldiers, veterans, mothers, teachers. Some angry, some heartbroken, all watching. "Look at this," she whispered, turning the phone toward her grandmother. People from all over are defending us. Grace put on her glasses, squinting at the screen. This girl stood up for her dad, and they punished her. I'm a veteran. My daughter went through the same thing. Stay strong, kid. Zero tolerance doesn't mean zero compassion. Grace exhaled slowly. Lord have mercy, the whole country's watching now. 8,000 miles away, in a bunker that smelled of sand and diesel fuel, Master Sergeant David Crawford refreshed a weak satellite connection, his hands shaking as he tried to load the video. The desert outside was quiet, wind scraping across concrete walls, the sky still black. He watched his daughter's face appear on the flickering screen, the defiance, the tears, the words. By the time it ended, the tablet case cracked beneath his grip. His world narrowed to a single thought: they broke her. Specialist Maria Santos appeared in the doorway, her voice cautious. "Sir, Command Sergeant Major Banks wants to see you. Now." The walk across the compound felt longer than any patrol. Every soldier who caught his eye already knew. News traveled fast in tight-knit ranks. Inside, Command Sergeant Major Jerome Banks sat behind a makeshift desk made from ammunition crates. On his tablet, the same video replayed, pixelated by distance but clear enough to cut through any fog. "I've been watching this since 400, Banks said quietly, pausing the screen on Lily's trembling face. "Half the battalion's seen it. Some of us have daughters, too." "My girl's 13, sir." David's voice cracked despite himself. "They suspended her, called her a threat for defending me." Banks turned the tablet around, displaying the school's website, Principal Whitfield's official portrait. Perfect hair, perfect smile. "Recognize the name?" "Whitfield?" David frowned. "Yeah, Captain Thomas Whitfield. We served near his region in 16. He got discharged for misappropriating Reconstruction funds. His brother's the mayor. His sister runs that school," Banks said. "You see the pattern." David's jaw clenched. "They're punishing my kid for something their family did." "Exactly." The room fell silent, heavy with understanding. Finally, David said what had been building since dawn. "I need to go home, sir. I can't just sit here while she—" Banks lifted a hand. "Already handled. Your unit's rotation home was scheduled next week. I've moved it up. Transport leaves in 6 hours." David blinked. "You pulled strings for me." "I pulled them for her," Banks replied, "and for every kid like her." He leaned forward, eyes hardening. "But listen to me. You show up angry and alone, they'll call you unstable. They'll twist it against her again. You want justice. You go home with purpose, not rage." Banks turned toward his radio. "Williams," he called out. Sergeant First Class Mike Williams stepped inside, 6 feet of quiet strength from Detroit, already sensing what was coming. "Contact Fort Benning, Fort Campbell, Fort Stewart," Banks ordered. "Find every ranger within driving distance of Arkansas, active or veteran. Spread the word through VFW posts and family networks." Williams hesitated. "What do I tell them, sir?" "Tell them a ranger's daughter was punished for defending her father's honor," Banks said. "Tell them this isn't about politics. It's about presence." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We're not going there to fight. We're going to stand." Williams nodded once. "Rangers lead the way." Banks met his gaze. "This time, son, they laid home." Back in Hickory Creek, Principal Whitfield held an emergency staff meeting in the library, the smell of coffee and tension thick in the air. Teachers sat stiffly in their chairs, avoiding each other's eyes. "I want to be absolutely clear," she began. "The video changes nothing. Our decision to suspend Miss Crawford stands. This school operates under zero tolerance. Threats of violence are never acceptable." Ms. Rodriguez raised her hand cautiously. "With respect, Principal Whitfield, the full video shows—" "The full video," Whitfield interrupted, "shows a student invoking military violence. That's all that matters." Coach Bill Turner, a former Marine turned PE teacher, crossed his arms. No, ma'am. What it shows is a kid getting pushed too far by bullies you never disciplined. Whitfield's eyes sharpened. Be careful, Coach Turner. I remind everyone your contracts include social media clauses. Public statements undermining administration could be considered breach of conduct. The room fell quiet. Everyone understood what she meant. Speak up, lose your job. Meanwhile, in a small white church down the street, another meeting was forming. Pastor Samuel Thompson, Aisha's father, stood in front of a group of veterans, parents, and townspeople crowded into the fellowship hall. Folding chairs creaked beneath the weight of outrage. She's 13, Pastor Thompson said, voice calm but carrying steel beneath it. A child defending her father, and they called her dangerous. They picked the wrong girl, said Bobby Ray Jenkins, a Vietnam vet with a voice like gravel. And the wrong family. You don't come after a ranger's kid. Grace Crawford sat quietly in the front row, her hands folded in her lap. The lines on her face deepened, but her voice, when she spoke, carried generations of dignity. We're not here to start trouble, she said. We're here to end injustice. My son gave this country 16 years. My granddaughter gave it her peace of mind. That's enough. Pastor Thompson nodded. Thursday night school board meeting. We show up calm, peaceful, united. Let the truth speak louder than anger. That same truth was spreading faster than anyone could contain. In living rooms across America, TV anchors replayed the video on loop. 13-year-old girl suspended for defending her deployed father. A growing social media outcry. Rumors of active duty Rangers mobilizing. The story wasn't just a headline anymore, it was a reckoning. And in small, unconnected moments across the country, a veteran polishing his medals, a mother hugging her child, a soldier scrolling through the story between shifts, people whispered the same thing. She's one of ours. At the Whitfield mansion, panic had finally cracked the facade. This is out of control, said Mayor Thomas Whitfield, packing across the marble floor. The governor's office called. Veterans Affairs wants answers. Let them call, Margaret replied, though her voice wavered. We followed policy. Policy doesn't matter when you're on national news looking like villains, he snapped. She turned sharply. So we apologize for upholding discipline, for protecting students from threats. Protecting, he scoffed. You protected your son, that's all this ever was. Jackson sat in the corner, silent for once. His phone buzzed endlessly with messages he couldn't bear to open, words like bully, coward, entitled. Outside, the sky turned the color of steel. The town's heartbeat had changed. By midnight, Sergeant Williams' phone was buzzing nonstop. Replies from Rangers scattered across the country. On leave, driving in. Got 4 vets in my truck. Be there by Thursday. She's family, say no more. At Fort Campbell, Colonel Mitchell approved quiet leave requests faster than his secretary could process them. I can't officially order this, he said. But God help me, I won't stop it either. At a VFW post in Texas, a veteran stood before a wall of names and whispered, "This one's for all our kids," before packing his uniform. And on the cold floor of a transport plane above the Atlantic, David Crawford finally let himself cry. 16 years in uniform, dozens of missions, losses he never spoke of, but nothing had ever hit him like seeing his daughter stand alone. She's tougher than I ever was, he murmured. Banks sat beside him, eyes on the same horizon. She learned it from you. The engines roared beneath them. The plane carried more than soldiers now. It carried purpose. Back in Hickory Creek, Lily sat on her bed, unable to sleep. Her room was small, filled with reminders of normal childhood, stuffed animals, worn books, a half-finished art project. But tonight, everything felt different. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Sweet girl, I've seen the video. I'm coming home. You didn't do anything wrong. Rangers lead the way. Dad. Lily's hands trembled. He knew. He was coming. Downstairs, Grace was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table. Papers spread out, school records, letters, phone numbers, and the old family Bible open beside them. When Lily came down the stairs, Grace didn't look up. You can't sleep either. No, ma'am. Grace poured her some tea the way her mother used to do. Tomorrow's another day, but not just any day. What do you mean? Grace looked out the window, where camera lights flickered faintly from across the street. The Rangers are coming. Lily blinked. Grandma, they're not really. Grace smiled, tired but sure. Oh, they are, baby. And when they do, this town's gonna remember what honor looks like. The old woman reached across the table and took Lily's hand. Outside, the frost thickened. The sky deepened. And somewhere over the dark horizon, engines were already humming toward Arkansas. The storm was coming, not of bullets but of silence, not of violence but of truth. And Hickory Creek would never sleep peacefully again. Why did a town that once prided itself on peace start locking its doors in daylight? By Tuesday morning, Hickory Creek had become a place of whispers. Outside the diner, conversation stopped when reporters walked by. The parking lot of the middle school sat half empty. Parents weren't sending their kids. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew the same rumor. The Rangers were coming. Inside her office, Principal Margaret Whitfield rehearsed calm she didn't feel. Her hair was perfect, her lipstick exact, but her hands shook slightly when she poured coffee. On her computer, national news headlines glared back at her. Arkansas girl suspended for defending deployed father. Rangers reportedly mobilizing in protest. She scrolled through comments until her stomach turned. Thousands of people she would never meet had already decided she was the villain. The intercom buzzed. Margaret, her secretary said, voice small. The superintendent's on line one again. Margaret lifted the phone. Yes, superintendent. Tell me it's not true, came the weary reply. Tell me your son isn't the boy in that video. Her silence answered for her. Margaret, the governor's office has called twice. Veterans groups are threatening protests. I can't shield you from this. I acted according to policy, she said, gripping the receiver so tightly her knuckles whitened. Zero tolerance means zero judgment, he cut in. You're suspending a soldier's child for standing up to a bully. That's not policy, that's suicide. He hung up before she could answer. For the first time in her career, Margaret Whitfield had no control over the narrative. Across town, the Crawford house felt smaller than ever. Reporters parked at the end of Pine Street, cameras waiting like vultures. Grace pulled the curtains shut and made breakfast anyway, biscuits and eggs, though Lily just stared at her plate. They're saying Dad's unit might come here, Lily whispered. Grace didn't look up from her coffee. They might. That'll make it worse. Or it'll make it right, Grace said softly. Sometimes folks need reminding who protects the peace they take for granted. The clock ticked, the house creaked. Each sound carried weight. Lily's phone buzzed with messages. Thousands of strangers sending support, some offering prayers, others threats. A nation divided by a child's courage. Aisha texted, Pastor says more people are coming to Thursday's meeting. Whole town's talking. Lily typed back slowly, I didn't mean for any of this. Maybe you were meant to. 8,000 miles away, another kind of quiet held. At Fort Campbell, 3 buses idled in the pre-dawn dark, headlights cutting through mist. Rangers moved between them, uniforms sharp, faces unreadable. They weren't marching to war, but it felt like one. Colonel Mitchell addressed them from the tarmac. You've read the brief. A ranger's daughter has been targeted for defending her father. You are not ordered to go, but if you go, you represent all of us. No aggression, no words, just presence. A low murmur answered him. One by one, soldiers climbed aboard the buses, some active duty, some long retired, medals glinting faintly beneath winter coats. A few brought wives, sons, daughters. It wasn't a deployment, it was a pilgrimage. Major Rebecca Stone, one of the few women in the regiment's history to command a field team, checked her roster. "We're rolling at 0200. Discipline is our weapon today." Her voice carried across the lot like a vow. Back in Arkansas, Sheriff Roy Baker sat behind his desk staring at his own reflection in a dark computer screen. He'd served in the Army once, long before politics, long before small-town power turned decency into compromise. His deputy, Marcus Hayes, the same man who'd escorted Lily from school, stood beside him. "You gonna let the mayor order arrests if the Rangers show up?" Marcus asked. Roy sighed. "Law says no gathering on school property without permission. Mayor's twisting that into trespassing. And if you enforce it, then I'm the sheriff who cuffed veterans for standing in silence." Marcus folded his arms. "Or you can be the one who kept peace by doing nothing." Roy rubbed his temples. "Sometimes nothing gets a man fired." "Sometimes doing the right thing does too," Marcus said quietly. The sheriff looked up, tired eyes softening. "Your dad served in Iraq, didn't he?" "Yeah, he died there." Roy nodded slowly. "Then you know what this means." Marcus smiled sadly, "More than they ever will." Across town, the church lights burned late again. The fellowship hall smelled of coffee, fried chicken, and planning. Veterans leaned over maps, deciding parking routes and seating arrangements for Thursday's school board meeting. "We're not giving Whitfield the circus she wants," said Pastor Thompson. "She wants anger on camera. We give her silence. Let the world see discipline, not chaos." Bobby Ray Jenkins thumped the table with a fist. "Silence is fine, preacher, but silence should feel like thunder." It would. By midnight, 47 active Rangers and nearly twice as many veterans were confirmed. Others were still driving, calling, coordinating. The 75th Ranger Regiment's unofficial network pulsed with one message: "Stand with the Crawfords." David Crawford's plane touched down at Dover at 3:00 a.m. He hadn't slept in 30 hours. Command Sergeant Major Banks walked beside him through the terminal, the kind of silence between them that comes from shared understanding. "Memphis in 4 hours, Banks said. "Vehicles are waiting there." David adjusted the garment bag over his shoulder, his dress uniform inside, medals polished until they reflected light like mirrors. "Feels strange wearing this for a fight without weapons." Banks gave a small smile. "Sometimes the uniform is the weapon." As the two men boarded the connecting flight, somewhere below them, night stretched endlessly across the country, over mountains, over quiet towns, over one girl's small house where a porch light still burned. Lily hadn't gone to bed. She sat cross-legged on her floor, surrounded by letters her father had sent over the years, faded ink, sand still trapped in the folds of envelopes. She read the old words like prayer. "Remember, you come from fighters who stand when standing matters." She whispered it aloud. "I'm standing, Daddy." Her grandmother appeared in the doorway, robe pulled tight. "You talking to him?" Lily nodded. "Then tell him his mama's proud." The next morning dawned too bright for what it carried. The news vans had multiplied. Reporters crowded the street like scavengers smelling story. Grace opened the front door and faced them. "No comment, the girl's a child, let her be." One reporter, younger, nervous, lowered his microphone. "Ma'am, we just want to know if it's true. Are Rangers really coming?" Grace's gaze didn't waver. "You'll find out soon enough." Behind her, Lily watched through the curtains. The cameras, the microphones, the strangers arguing outside her home. She didn't feel brave. She felt small, exposed. But deep down, beneath the fear, a different emotion flickered. Not pride exactly, something quieter. The knowledge that truth was finally louder than lies. At the Whitfield mansion, the mayor and his sister held their final strategy session. Sunlight poured across polished marble, reflecting off trophies and framed campaign photos. Thomas paced. "We're surrounded. If those rangers show up in uniform, the optics will destroy us." Margaret clung to her script. "Then we control the narrative. Channel 7's giving me airtime tonight. I'll talk about safety, mental health, trauma in military families." Her brother cut her off. "Margaret, stop. You're burning this family down." But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Power had become her armor, and armor doesn't bend, it breaks. Across the street, Emma Whitfield, Thomas's wife, watched the exchange from the doorway, tears threatening but never falling. She'd seen the video too. She knew the truth. When Thomas left the room, she whispered to her sister-in-law, "You could end this with one apology." Margaret's voice went cold. "Whitfields don't apologize." Emma's reply came soft but sharp. "Then you'll learn why you should." The sun slid lower, shadows lengthened. The countdown to Thursday had begun. At Fort Benning, 2 more buses rolled out. At Fort Stewart, a convoy of private trucks followed behind. At a small base in Texas, a handful of retired Rangers climbed into cars, uniforms pressed, eyes steady. Each vehicle carried the same unspoken oath: we don't leave our own behind. By nightfall, highways from 4 different states glowed with the steady motion of headlights moving toward one small Arkansas town. Inside one of those buses, Sergeant Angela Porter sat beside a younger soldier, both in dress uniforms already pressed for the morning. "You ever been to Arkansas?" she asked. "No, ma'am." "Pretty place," she said, staring out the window. "Small towns forget where safety comes from. Maybe tomorrow they'll remember." The bus rumbled on through the dark, the road stretching endless ahead. Back in Hickory Creek, the sheriff's phone buzzed again. The mayor demanding preparations. The county office warning about crowds. Roy Baker stared at the messages, then quietly powered the phone off. "Sometimes the best thing law can do," he muttered, "is stay out of the way of justice." Outside, the air felt charged, the way it does before a storm. Grace sat on the porch swing, a shawl around her shoulders. Lily joined her, climbing under the blanket without a word. For a long time they just listened to the night, the crickets, the distant hum of tires on the highway, the whisper of wind through trees. Finally Lily said, "Grandma, oh, what if they don't believe us, even with the truth?" Grace looked up at the stars. "Then we keep standing. Truth don't need permission to exist." The girl leaned her head against her grandmother's shoulder. "You think Dad's really on his way?" Grace smiled. "Oh, he's closer than you think." Miles away, David Crawford's convoy crossed the Tennessee line. Ahead of him, the horizon blushed with the first hint of dawn. He rolled down the window, breathing in cold air, the kind that wakes something primal. For 16 years he'd fought wars in silence. But this one, this quiet war for his daughter's dignity, felt different, more dangerous in a way bullets could never be. He checked his watch. Less than 24 hours until the school board meeting. Banks' voice came over the radio. "We're not going there to shout, Sergeant. We're going to remind them who we are." David nodded, though no one could see him. "Copy that, sir." The convoy pressed on, headlights carving through the darkness. And somewhere behind them, more vehicles joined, unmarked trucks, motorcycles, family cars. Veterans, active duty, strangers who'd watched the video and felt something stir deep in their chest. By midnight, the highways into Hickory Creek looked like silver rivers, carrying a flood the town never expected. No one could stop it now. Not the mayor, not the principal, not the noise of politics or fear. Because this wasn't just about one girl anymore. It was about what she represented, every military family that had swallowed injustice to stay polite, every soldier who'd fought for peace while their children fought to be understood. And as the night deepened, Lily finally drifted to sleep for the first time in days, unaware that miles away, a line of rangers in dress uniforms stood outside a gas station under flickering fluorescent light, their reflections stretching across the pavement. No words, no banners, no anger. Just purpose. They were coming home. Why did the whole town go quiet at sunrise? It started with a sound most folks hadn't heard since parade days, the steady rhythm of boots on pavement. Not rushed, not chaotic, just deliberate, controlled, a heartbeat you could feel through the ground. By dawn, the frost had melted into mist that curled through the trees and across the two-lane highway leading into Hickory Creek. Birds fell silent as the first convoy appeared from the bend, 5 government vans, followed by civilian trucks, a handful of motorcycles, and a line of cars that stretched further than anyone could see. The men and women who stepped out weren't armed. They didn't need to be. Each uniform bore the patch of the 75th Ranger Regiment, pressed clean, boots polished. Their faces were calm, not angry, not defiant, just resolute. Local drivers pulled over, some waved, some just stared. Word spread through gas stations, diners, and living rooms, they're here. At the Crawford home, Grace stood at the window, her hands trembling against the lace curtain. "They came," she whispered. Lily stood beside her, still in pajamas, her hair a mess from sleep. "There's so many." Grace nodded slowly, emotion rising in her throat. "He told me once that when one ranger stands, they all do." Down the road, reporters scrambled for positions. Cameras clicked. Drones hovered above the mist, capturing the kind of image that would play on every screen before noon. A long line of rangers walking toward the center of town in silence, medals glinting in the cold light. At the front walked Sergeant David Crawford in his dress uniform, ribbons neat, jaw set. Behind him, Command Sergeant Major Banks and Major Rebecca Stone. No chants, no signs, no words, just quiet purpose. Every house they passed seemed to hold its breath. Children peeked from windows. Veterans saluted from porches. A few people, ashamed, moved, uncertain, just cried. The air felt heavier than it should have, like grief and pride had collided. At the sheriff's office, Roy Baker stood at the door, hat in hand, Marcus Hayes beside him. "You going to stop them?" Marcus asked. Roy shook his head slowly. "Son, there are moments in life when the badge stays on, but the man underneath remembers who he was. This is one of those moments." He stepped forward, standing by the road as the first rangers passed. He raised his hand not as sheriff, but as a soldier once more. Crawford noticed. He stopped for just a heartbeat, returned the salute, and kept walking. "Rangers lead the way," Roy murmured. Across town, Principal Whitfield's office had become a bunker. She stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear, watching the growing formation outside the school gates. "They're not supposed to be here," she hissed into the receiver. "This is intimidation." Her brother's voice came sharp through the line. "Intimidation? They haven't said a word." "They're uniformed. It's a statement of force." "No, Margaret," the mayor replied, his tone weary now. "It's a statement of honor, something you might have forgotten." She slammed the phone down. Outside, the school lawn filled with people, parents, teachers, veterans, kids who'd skipped class to witness history. The rangers formed in rows, not blocking entrances, not crossing property lines, just standing. Reporters whispered as cameras rolled. "This is unlike any protest we've seen. Total silence, total order." They're not shouting slogans, they're standing guard. At 9:30 a.m., David Crawford stepped forward. No speech, no microphone, just him, in full dress uniform, placing his ranger beret on the school's front steps. The crowd fell utterly still. Lily watched from the edge of the crowd, tears brimming. Grace's arm held her close. Her father turned slightly, scanning the crowd until his eyes found her. The moment froze, father and daughter, separated by space but connected by everything that mattered. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just nodded once, the kind of gesture that says, "I see you, I'm proud, I'm home." Behind him, Command Sergeant Major Banks broke the silence with 4 words that carried farther than any loudspeaker. "For those who stand." Then he saluted. The entire line of Rangers followed, a wall of raised hands, precise and unshaking. People wept openly. Reporters lowered their cameras. Even those who doubted, who'd mocked, felt the weight of it. Inside the school, Jackson sat alone in the principal's office. His phone buzzed nonstop, messages from classmates, strangers, trolls, and threats. He stared through the blinds, watching men and women who'd actually seen war standing for a girl he'd made cry. His reflection in the glass looked smaller than he remembered. His mother paced behind him. "We'll ride this out, the board will see reason." But he wasn't listening anymore. "Mom," he said quietly, "I lied." Her steps froze. He turned to face her. "I lied about what happened. I made her look dangerous because I was embarrassed." "Jackson." "They didn't believe me because I was right," he said, voice breaking. "They believed me because of you." For the first time, Margaret Whitfield had no words. The meeting wasn't until evening, but by noon the streets around the town hall were lined with people. Every restaurant, every gas station, every parking lot overflowed. Reporters set up tents. Volunteers brought food and water. Local businesses hung handwritten signs that read simply, "We stand with Lily." From the church balcony, Pastor Thompson watched the crowd gather. He'd seen protests before, angry, loud, divided. This wasn't that. This felt sacred. Grace and Lily arrived quietly, escorted by Sheriff Baker and Deputy Hayes. The moment they stepped out of the car, cameras flashed, but no one shouted questions. It was as if even the press understood they were walking into something bigger than news. Lily's eyes widened as she saw them, a sea of uniforms. Some were young, freshly shaved, crisp in their blues. Others were older, faces weathered, medals dull with time. Some in wheelchairs, some leaning on canes, all standing shoulder to shoulder. The crowd parted as she walked through. No applause, no cheers, just silence, respect louder than sound. When she reached her father, she hesitated, then ran the last few steps. He caught her, arms wrapping tight, his beret pressed against her hair. For a moment, everything else disappeared. "You did good, Lily May," he whispered. "You stood when standing mattered." "I thought you'd be mad," she said, voice muffled against his chest. He shook his head. "Mad, no, proud, more than you'll ever know." Grace approached, her cane tapping the pavement. David straightened, saluting his mother out of habit more than formality. "Still standing tall, I see," she said, voice trembling with pride. "Learned from the best," he replied. The church bells rang 6 times evening, the signal. Across the street, the school board hall filled with cameras and officials. Margaret Whitfield sat at the center table, composure fragile but intact. Her brother, the mayor, avoided her eyes. The door opened. The Crawfords entered, escorted by the sheriff. The Rangers followed behind but stopped at the doorway, forming a silent perimeter outside, refusing to turn the meeting into theater. Lily sat beside her father and grandmother. The room buzzed with low whispers. The board chair cleared his throat. "Tonight's agenda concerns the disciplinary review of student Lily Mae Crawford." Reporters leaned in. Principal Whitfield adjusted her papers. "I stand by my decision. Regardless of public sentiment, we have to uphold safety in." David rose. "No permission, no hesitation." The chair blinked. "Sir, this isn't." He ignored him. "My name is Master Sergeant David Crawford, United States Army Ranger. I've served this country 16 years. I've lost friends in deserts most of you can't find on a map. And while I was doing that, my little girl was sitting in a classroom, being punished for defending me." The room fell silent. He took a breath. You talk about safety. Let me tell you about it. Safety is a man sleeping next to his daughter's empty bed because duty called him overseas. Safety is a grandmother raising a child while praying the phone never rings at 3 a.m. Safety isn't found in rules printed on paper. It's earned every single day by families like mine. He paused, his voice low but steady. You suspended my daughter for having courage. You called her dangerous because she refused to be small. Margaret tried to interject, but the words faltered. David turned toward her. You can hide behind policy all you want, but what you did wasn't policy, it was pride. She flinched as if struck. He looked back at the board. You want to know what a threat looks like? It's a grown man bullying a child. It's a system that punishes the quiet because they make noise in the wrong direction. Then his tone softened. But we're not here for vengeance, we're here for truth. He stepped aside. Lily. She hesitated, knees trembling as she stood, her voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted them to stop. I said my dad would make them pay because I didn't know what else to say. I thought if they knew who he was, they'd stop hurting me. She looked at her father, tears streaking her cheeks. I didn't mean to make trouble. I just wanted to feel safe. A long silence. Then someone, maybe Coach Turner, maybe Ms. Rodriguez, began to clap, soft at first, then louder. The sound grew, wave after wave, until even the board members joined. Margaret sat motionless, face pale. The board chair stood. Effective immediately, the suspension of Lily Mae Crawford is rescinded. An apology will be issued. And Principal Whitfield, your conduct will be reviewed by the superintendent. The crowd rose, applause thundered, but outside where the Rangers waited, not one of them moved. Not yet. David turned toward the door, giving Banks a nod. Banks raised his hand once more. Rangers. Hundreds of boots clicked in unison. Dismissed. No cheers, no shouts, just the quiet sound of hundreds of soldiers walking away, leaving behind a town forever changed. That night, as the news anchors replayed the images, the salute, the silence, the reunion, America watched not a protest, but a lesson. And in the small yellow house on Pine Street, Lily sat by her window, watching the stars. Her father leaned in the doorway. You okay, kiddo? She smiled faintly. Yeah, I think I finally am. He nodded, resting a hand on her shoulder. You changed more than you know. She looked out at the night, voice soft but sure. I didn't want to change anything. I just wanted to be heard. David smiled. Sometimes that's all it takes. Outside, the last of the reporters packed up. The streetlights hummed. Hickory Creek was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet, not ignorance, not apathy. This was the kind of silence that followed understanding. The kind that echoed. The kind that would be remembered. Why did victory feel so quiet? The morning after the meeting, the sun rose slow and gold over Hickory Creek, the kind of morning that looks peaceful only because the world is too tired to keep fighting. The streets were clean, the air still, but everywhere you looked, something invisible hung in the air. Reverence, maybe, or guilt, or awe. Grace Crawford stood on the porch, a mug of coffee warming her palms, the newspaper on the table beside her. It wasn't often Hickory Creek made national headlines, but today it did. The silence that shook a town. Rangers lead the way home. Every photograph told the same story. A girl in tears, a soldier standing proud, and a wall of uniforms behind them like living history. Inside, Lily sat on the couch, knees tucked beneath her, the TV muted as images of herself flickered across every channel. Reporters spoke words like courage, resilience, redemption. She didn't recognize herself in any of them. Her father stood by the window, staring out toward the school, still half expecting trouble. They'll start spinning it soon, he said quietly. Someone always does. Grace turned a page of the newspaper. Let them spin. You can't twist truth that stands on its own feet. But she was wrong. You could and they would try. By noon, new headlines appeared online. Principal claims she was vilified by veterans, military intimidation or peaceful protest. Governor calls for investigation into unlawful assembly. The storm hadn't ended. It had only changed shape. David sat down beside his daughter, voice low but firm. You stay off social media for a while, okay? Let it breathe. Lily nodded, though she couldn't look away from the screen. Every few seconds, her phone buzzed, strangers sending messages from all over the world. You're my hero. My dad's a Marine. Thank you for speaking for us. Don't ever let them make you small. She scrolled faster. Some comments weren't kind. Entitled military family. Publicity stunt. Where was her mom? That last one stung deepest. She didn't answer them. She never did. But her eyes lingered on the words like bruises. David noticed. Don't read that garbage. People who have never sacrificed anything love judging those who do. I know, she said softly. It's just they don't know me. He exhaled, resting a hand on her shoulder. They don't have to, I do. Outside, a pickup truck slowed in front of the house. A man stepped out, uniform folded neatly under one arm, hat pressed against his chest. His name was Sergeant Lewis, retired ranger, now a mechanic from Texas. He knocked gently on the door. Grace opened it, surprised. Can I help you, son? Ma'am, he said, voice quiet but certain. I just wanted to shake that young lady's hand. I've got 2 daughters. I could not come. Grace called into the house. Lily, baby, someone here for you. Lily stepped into the doorway, nervous at first. The man smiled gently, lines around his eyes deep from both sun and sorrow. He held out his hand. You reminded us what honor looks like. She hesitated, then shook his hand. His grip was warm, strong. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once, then turned back to his truck. As he drove away, Grace noticed tears streaking down his face. By afternoon, there were dozens like him, veterans stopping by, leaving notes, patches, folded flags, tokens of gratitude on the Crawford porch. The steps became a small shrine to quiet strength. Not everyone was happy about it. Inside City Hall, Mayor Thomas Whitfield faced his own reckoning. His phone rang non-stop, state officials, reporters, angry donors. He'd spent his whole career building power through polish, not principle, but power cracks under truth. He looked across his desk at his sister, who sat pale and trembling. They've suspended you, he said simply. Margaret's eyes darted to his. Suspended. The superintendent called. They're launching a full investigation. The board voted unanimously last night. She swallowed. You can fix this. I can't, he said quietly. I won't. Her mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time, she realized her brother wasn't her shield anymore. Thomas rubbed his temples. You've spent your life talking about rules, Margaret, but somewhere along the line, you forgot about people. He stood, adjusting his suit. This family's done cleaning up your mess. When he left, the echo of the door closing felt final. At the school, Coach Turner gathered the teachers during lunch. The board, ordering a review of all bullying reports. Looks like some of us might finally get to teach without fear again. Ms. Rodriguez smiled faintly. Feels strange, doesn't it? Justice actually working. Coach shrugged. Maybe it just needed a ranger's kid to remind us how it's supposed to look. Outside, the flag flew half-mast, not for mourning but for reflection. The day stretched slow, quiet. By evening, the town seemed to exhale. David sat on the porch steps, boots off, beer untouched beside him. The twilight glow softened the hard edges of his face. Lily joined him, barefoot, her hair loose. For the first time in weeks, she looked like a kid again. Grandma says you used to sit here every night before a deployment, she said. I did. Were you scared? He thought about it, always. But you still went. He smiled faintly. That's what courage is, doing it scared anyway. They sat in silence, watching fireflies blink across the yard. Do you think people will forget? She asked finally. They'll move on, he said. But forgetting and moving on aren't the same thing. What matters is what we learned. Lily looked down. What did you learn? That sometimes the fight that matters most isn't the one with bullets. It's the one where you stay human. Grace stepped onto the porch, her shawl wrapped tight. And sometimes, she added softly, being human's the hardest fight there is. That night the town of Hickory Creek slept lighter. No sirens, no shouting, just quiet houses and the low hum of forgiveness beginning to grow in the dark. But outside the Crawford home, under the porch light, one figure didn't sleep. Jackson Whitfield stood at the gate, head down, clutching a folded piece of paper. He hadn't told his mother he was there. He didn't plan to. David opened the door before the boy could knock. Evening, David said evenly. Jackson's voice shook. I came to say I'm sorry. David studied him for a moment. For what you did or for getting caught? Jackson met his eyes. For what I did, I lied. I didn't think it would go that far. I just wanted people to stop making fun of me for, he hesitated, for being the principal's son. David nodded slowly. You made a mistake, but you came here to say that out loud. That's how you start fixing it. He turned toward the door. Lily. She appeared hesitantly, arms crossed, unsure. Jackson swallowed hard. I was wrong about everything. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say it. Lily's eyes flickered between anger and something softer. You made my life miserable, she said. I know. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I know. She took a breath, then said quietly, I forgive you. He blinked, surprised. Just like that? No, she said, not just like that, but someone has to stop hating first. He nodded, voice breaking, thank you. As he walked away, David watched him go. You really forgave him. Lily looked up at her father. I think if I didn't, I'd still be giving him power. David smiled, smart kid. Grace chuckled softly from the porch. She gets it from me. The laughter that followed was quiet, real and healing. The next morning, a letter arrived in a plain envelope. Inside was a note from the Department of Defense, not official orders, just a message. To Master Sergeant Crawford and family, your daughter's courage reminded us why we serve. Respectfully, from every soldier who has ever missed a birthday, a Christmas, or a first day of school, thank you. David read it twice before passing it to Grace. Lily traced the words with her finger. They wrote that for me. No, her grandmother said softly. They wrote it because of you. The days that followed blurred interviews, letters, invitations, offers for TV spots, documentaries, even scholarships. But David refused them all. We don't turn pain into performance, he told the reporters. We just move forward. Lily went back to school 2 weeks later. Some kids avoided her, unsure how to act. Others whispered her name like legend. A few apologized. She accepted each one with quiet grace. Aisha walked beside her in the hallway. Feels weird being famous. I don't want to be famous, Lily said. I just want things to be fair. Maybe they will be now. Lily smiled faintly. Maybe. After school, she walked home under the autumn light. The air smelled of rain and possibility. She paused at the fence where it had all started, the place where she'd stood her ground. She placed a hand on the cold metal and whispered to herself, You did it. A small voice inside answered, You did it scared, but you did it. That night, as the house went quiet, Grace found her old Bible open on the table. A note rested inside in Lily's handwriting. Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to be silent. Grace smiled through tears. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of that day, the steady rhythm of boots on pavement, the sound of dignity walking home. And though the cameras were gone and the headlines had faded, something had changed in Hickory Creek, something permanent. The kind of change that doesn't need to be remembered to keep existing. The kind that lives quietly inside those who witnessed it. The kind that says, sometimes the loudest voices are the ones that never have to raise at all. Why does peace feel harder to live with than conflict? 3 weeks had passed since the world stopped watching Hickory Creek, and the silence that followed felt strange. Not empty, just heavy, like the echo of something that once thundered through every street but had now sunk into the walls and soil. Lily Crawford's face was still online, on old articles, video thumbnails, even the occasional meme that twisted her story into something it was never meant to be. But in Hickory Creek itself, life was returning to something that almost resembled normal. Almost. The school reopened fully. Principal Whitfield's office sat empty, the blinds closed, the nameplate gone. Her replacement, a soft-spoken interim principal from Little Rock, greeted students with a handshake at the door every morning. And yet, every hallway still remembered. Teachers whispered a little less. Students watched their words a little more. And the flagpole out front always had a fresh wreath at its base, placed quietly each week by someone who never signed their name. For Lily, peace didn't arrive with applause or headlines. It came in moments so small they almost went unnoticed. Sitting with Aisha at lunch without stares, the sound of pencils scratching paper during class, the way silence finally stopped feeling like judgment. Her father had returned to base temporarily, administrative duties, debriefs, a promise to keep his head down. But the army had changed too. Somewhere deep in its endless bureaucracy, her story had spread, sparking quiet conversations about families, about sacrifice, about the weight carried by those left behind. Grace still woke up before dawn, brewed her coffee, and read her Bible on the porch. She watched the horizon each morning like she was expecting something, not trouble this time, but purpose. One morning she called out, "Lily, come look at this." Lily stepped outside, still in her pajamas. The sky glowed pink above the hills, the air crisp and alive. Grace handed her a letter, envelope thick and official. Came from Fort Benning. Lily tore it open, her heart thudding. "Miss Crawford, the 75th Ranger Regiment would like to extend an honorary invitation to visit Fort Benning with your family, in recognition of your courage and conduct. You have reminded us all what we fight for. Command Sergeant Major Jerome Banks." Her hands trembled as she read it again. "They want us to go there." Grace smiled. "Seems like it." The trip took place a week later. Reporters begged for access, but David refused. "No cameras," he said. "This one's just for us." The base sprawled beneath the Georgia sun, neat rows of barracks, obstacle courses, and parade grounds that smelled of sweat, dust, and history. Soldiers saluted as they passed, eyes lingering on the girl they'd all read about. At the Ranger Memorial, a stone archway led to a quiet garden lined with names carved into granite, men and women who never came home. Lily walked slowly, her small hand brushing over the cold letters. Her father knelt beside her. "Every name here has a story," he said softly. "And every story has someone waiting back home, a wife, a child, a mother just like you." Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "Do you think they'd be proud of me?" David smiled faintly. "I think they already are." When they reached the center of the garden, Command Sergeant Major Banks was waiting, his broad frame casting a shadow over the memorial's flagstones. He greeted David with a handshake and Lily with a salute that made her blush. "Miss Crawford," he said, "you gave this uniform something we forget sometimes, a reason." She looked up at him, unsure how to respond. "I didn't mean to do anything big." "Most people who change the world never mean to," Banks said. That afternoon, the regiment's band played softly as the Crawfords stood on the reviewing field. No speeches, no crowds, just soldiers at attention, and one small family standing quietly among them. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows. The moment didn't need words. When they drove home that evening, the silence in the car was full, not awkward, not empty, just understood. But peace, David knew, never stayed simple. The following week, the media came knocking again. Documentaries, podcasts, talk shows, everyone wanted a piece of the ranger's daughter. Agents called, promising book deals and scholarships, television specials, even movie rights. Grace tore up the first offer in front of them. "We don't sell truth," she said firmly. Lily looked torn. "But what if telling it helps other kids?" David studied her face. "It can if we tell it our way, quietly, truthfully, no spotlight." So instead of signing contracts, they spoke once, at a small veterans event in Little Rock. No cameras, no press, just a hall full of people who already understood. David stood on stage in his uniform, Lily beside him in a simple blue dress. "My daughter reminded me that courage doesn't come from rank or medals," he said, voice steady but thick with emotion. "It comes from standing up when standing hurts." He looked down at her. "She's taught me that strength isn't loud, it's steady." The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was gentle, warm, and real. Afterward, as they walked to the car, Lily asked, "Do you think things will ever go back to how they were?" David glanced at her, thoughtful. "No, but maybe they'll be better." At home, life slowly took root again. School days, Sunday church, evenings on the porch. Sometimes veterans still stopped by, leaving gifts, a folded flag, a patch, a letter. Sometimes strangers sent mail from far away, sharing stories of their own daughters. And sometimes, when the wind blew through the pine trees at dusk, Lily would hear it again, that memory of boots on pavement, that silent march that had changed everything. But with peace came reflection, and reflection can hurt. Some nights David sat in the living room alone, television dark, staring at nothing. The war in him wasn't over. It rarely was. Grace noticed. She didn't say anything for a while. Then one night she joined him with 2 cups of coffee and no words. After a long silence, she said softly, "You did right by her." He didn't look up. "I almost didn't. I wanted to storm that school the second I saw the video. Banks stopped me, said dignity doesn't shout." Grace smiled faintly. "That old man's wiser than most pastors I know." David chuckled quietly, then sobered. "You think all this really changed anything?" Grace sipped her coffee. "Maybe not the world, but maybe the world's not the point. Maybe you just changed her world and that's enough." Lily appeared in the doorway, sleepy-eyed. "I heard that." They laughed softly. She climbed between them on the couch, curling up under her father's arm. The house felt smaller that night, warmer. Outside, the old porch light flickered. The wind hummed low through the trees. Peace wasn't perfect. It was fragile, scarred, and real. Days passed, then weeks. Slowly, the story of Hickory Creek became something people told in fragments, a lesson, a rumor, a quiet legend about a girl and the soldiers who stood for her. But for the Crawfords, it wasn't legend. It was memory. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, Lily found an old wooden box her father from his first deployment. Inside were letters, photos, and a folded patch. Ranger Tab CRAWFORD-D. She carried it downstairs. "Dad, can I have this?" He smiled. "That's part of my uniform." "I know," she said, clutching it carefully, "but it feels like part of mine too." He hesitated, then nodded. "It always was." Later that night, she pinned it to her corkboard above her desk, not as decoration, as a reminder. Below it she wrote on a scrap of paper, "Stand quietly, stand true." In town, things began to shift. Principal Whitfield's position was filled permanently by Ms. Rodriguez, the first teacher to defend Lily when it mattered. The school started a new program, Voices of Courage, where students could speak freely about struggles at home, about military families, about empathy. Coach Turner began mentoring the boys who used to follow Jackson around, helping them turn arrogance into discipline. Jackson himself spent afternoons volunteering at the Veterans Hall, serving meals to men his mother used to ignore. He never spoke about that day again, but his silence, too, carried change. Hickory Creek began to remember itself, not the headlines but the heart underneath. One evening, Lily and her father drove out past the edge of town to the overlook above the river, their quiet place. The sky bled orange into purple as dusk fell over the water. "You know," David said softly, "I think about what Banks told me before I came home." "What did he say?" "He said sometimes we fight wars without realizing the people we love are fighting theirs at home." Lily looked down at the river, voice thoughtful. "Then maybe I won mine." He smiled. "You did." They sat together, watching the last light fade. When the first stars appeared, David spoke again, quieter now. "You ever wonder why we do it, Lily? Why people serve? Why they keep going back?" She thought for a long time before answering. Maybe it's not about fighting. Maybe it's about protecting something worth the fight. He nodded slowly. "That's exactly it." The air turned cool. Crickets began their chorus. The town lights shimmered below. And for the first time in a long time, David Crawford felt at peace, not because the world had changed, but because he'd learned to live in it again. As they drove home, Lily rested her head against the window, eyes heavy. The reflection of the stars shimmered across her face. In that quiet, her father glanced at her and thought, "She'll never know how much she saved me too." Sometimes healing doesn't arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it just sits beside you, breathing softly in the dark, reminding you that the war is finally over. Why do people call something over when the echoes are still living? 6 months passed before Hickory Creek started to believe its own calm. The story had faded from headlines, buried under new noise, elections, scandals, the next tragedy somewhere else. But for those who'd lived it, the memory remained sharp, folded into their daily lives like a scar you stop noticing until someone asks about it. Lily had grown taller, her hair longer. Her smile came easier now, though sometimes it still carried a flicker of disbelief, as if she couldn't quite trust peace to stay. The school had changed in quiet ways. Bullies walked slower. Teachers listened longer. The new principal, Ms. Rodriguez, had made one rule that every student knew by heart: words matter. Each week she'd post a quote on the hallway board. One morning, Lily arrived to see hers there, written in careful blue chalk. "Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to be silent. Lily Crawford." She stared at it for a long time, her chest tightening in that strange way pride and embarrassment mix when they meet. "Pretty good quote," Aisha teased beside her. Lily smiled. "Feels weird seeing my name on a wall." "Feels right to me." Outside, the weather was turning again, warm days fading into spring rain. The town was waking from a long sleep. Flags hung clean. The diner played country music again. People smiled without hesitation when they passed the Crawfords on Main Street. But fame, even uninvited, leaves shadows. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a National Foundation, glossy paper, embossed seal, official tone. "Dear Ms. Crawford, the Valor Youth Foundation would be honored to present Lily with the National Courage Award at our annual gala in Washington, D.C. Her example has inspired millions. We would cover all travel expenses." Grace read it first. "Seems fancy," she said, setting it on the table. David read it next, frowning slightly. "Awards are for endings. We're still in the middle." Lily studied the letter quietly. Maybe it's not about the award. Maybe it's about showing people like me they're not alone. He met her eyes, softening. "You want to go?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I think I do." They went. The flight to D.C. was Lily's first time on a plane. She pressed her face to the window as clouds drifted below like frozen waves. "Feels weird," she whispered. David chuckled. Every first does. The gala was held in a marble hall that glittered under chandeliers. Men in tuxedos, women in gowns, soldiers in dress uniforms. The kind of place where every sound echoes like it's afraid to die. When Lily stepped onto the stage, the crowd rose in a standing ovation. She froze for a heartbeat under the lights. Then, with a breath her father had taught her, slow, deep, steady, she began. "I'm not brave because I spoke up," she said. "I spoke up because I was scared. And sometimes being scared and still doing the right thing, that's enough." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "My dad's a ranger. My grandma's the strongest woman I know. But they taught me something bigger than strength. They taught me that silence can hurt as much as cruelty. And when you finally break it, you don't just free yourself. You free everyone listening." When she finished, the room didn't clap right away. It breathed. Then applause came like rain, rolling, real. Later, as she stood with her father by the hotel window overlooking the Capitol lights, she said softly, "I think I understand now." "Understand what?" "Why you fight, why you keep going back." He smiled faintly. "And why's that?" "Because sometimes the world needs reminding." He looked at her, his little girl, now something bigger. "You're not wrong. The trip home should have been peaceful, but attention never travels alone." Reporters waited at the airport. Paparazzi followed the car. The internet, always hungry, began feeding again. New headlines appeared. "Ranger's daughter becomes symbol of modern patriotism." From suspension to spotlight. Commentators debated her words. Politicians quoted them. Celebrities posted about them. And somewhere between the noise, something began to feel wrong. One night, David sat in the living room watching a late-night host joke about the little girl who scared the army into showing up at her school. The audience laughed. He turned off the TV. Grace, sitting across the room, said quietly, "They'll twist it any way they can." He rubbed his eyes. They turned a stand for dignity into entertainment. Grace sighed. "That's what the world does, but dignity doesn't need their approval." He looked toward the staircase where Lily's light still glowed under her door. "She deserves to grow up normal, without being a symbol." "Maybe she can't," Grace said, "but she can choose how to be one." The next morning, the family met around the kitchen table. Lily looked between them, sensing what was coming. David said it plainly. "They're offering book deals now, speeches, endorsements. You'll be on talk shows for the next year if we let this keep going." Lily frowned. "I didn't ask for any of that." "I know," he said gently, "but you'll have to decide whether to speak again or step away. You can't do both." She stared at the floor, thinking, "If I walk away, they'll make up their own story." "And if you stay," he said, "they'll own it." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "Maybe I'll speak when it matters, not when they want me to." David smiled, proud and sad all at once. That's the right kind of silence. Over the next months, they lived smaller on purpose. No interviews, no press. David turned down invitations to military panels. Lily stopped checking her name online. And yet the world still found ways to remind them. Veterans, kids sent letters. Teachers wrote essays about empathy. A high school in Ohio started a Crawford Pledge, a vow to stand up for classmates facing injustice. It wasn't fame anymore. It was something quieter, influence without ownership. One night in late May, a package arrived at the Crawford house, postmarked from an unknown address. Inside was a framed photograph, the image of that day in front of the school. David standing tall, Lily beside him, rangers lined in silence behind. At the bottom, handwritten in neat block letters, "Sometimes we forget what we stand for. Thanks for reminding us." The men and women of the 75th Ranger Regiment. Lily hung it in the hallway, not in the living room where guests could see, but in the space only family walked through. It wasn't for show, it was for remembering. As the school year ended, Lily was invited to speak at her graduation ceremony. She almost said no, but her grandmother said something that changed her mind. "Child, if you don't tell your story, someone else will. Better it come from your heart than their headlines." So she spoke, standing on that same stage where her year had once begun in shame. "I used to think silence made you invisible," she said. "Now I know it can make you powerful if you use it to listen first and speak second." The gym fell still. Parents cried, teachers wiped their eyes. When the ceremony ended, David hugged her tight. "That's twice you've made the world listen," he said. Lily grinned. "Maybe next year I'll just pass math instead." He laughed, and for once it sounded free. That night the Crawfords returned home under a sky full of fireflies. Grace sat on the porch, waiting as always, the soft creak of the swing keeping time with the summer air. "You are beautiful, baby," she said when Lily sat beside her. Lily smiled. "Grandma, why do you always sit out here at night?" Grace looked toward the stars. "Because this is when the world tells the truth. No noise, no news, just you and what's left of your soul." Lily leaned against her. "Do you think we'll ever be normal again?" Grace chuckled softly. "Normal's overrated, peace, that's what you hold on to." From inside, David called, "You two coming in?" Grace looked toward the door, then back at her granddaughter. "You go ahead, honey. I'll be there in a minute." Lily kissed her cheek and went inside. Grace stayed, eyes glistening in the starlight. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered, "for letting her learn the hard way and still come out soft." Inside, David placed his old Ranger beret back in its box. The war inside him felt quieter these days, less like fire, more like embers. He stood by the window, watching the faint glow of porch light through the glass. And in that moment, he realized something that hadn't occurred to him until then. The battalion hadn't surrounded a school that day to protect a child. They'd done it to protect what she reminded them of. That sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. He whispered it under his breath, not as a moral, not as a lesson, but as a prayer. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, whispering over Hickory Creek like an old song coming home. And as the night deepened, the house stood still, quiet, unafraid, alive with the kind of silence that only follows redemption. Why do some moments refuse to grow old, no matter how much time passes? 15 years had come and gone since that cold October morning, when a scared 13-year-old girl stood her ground outside a middle school in Hickory Creek. The world had changed 1,000 times since then. Wars ended. Others began. People rose and fell, but for Lily Crawford, some days still lived behind her eyes like they'd never left. She was 28 now. Not a child, not quite settled either. She traded the quiet fields of Arkansas for the noise of the world, college, travel, teaching. But every path she took had the same compass buried deep inside her, the memory of a silence that once shook everything. And on a cool spring afternoon, that memory brought her home. The town was smaller than she remembered. The streets had new names, the old diner was a bakery now, and the school had been rebuilt with glass walls and solar panels. Progress, time, life moving on. But the air still smelled the same. Pine, dust, and something like forgiveness. Lily parked her car on Pine Street, right in front of the yellow house with the sagging porch that still refused to fall. The same wind chime still hung by the door, its faint metallic song carrying through the warm breeze. Grace Crawford had passed 3 years ago, peacefully in her sleep. The house was empty now, though Lily still kept it exactly as it had been, the coffee mug by the sink, the Bible open on the table, the old rocking chair facing the horizon. She stepped onto the porch, her heels clicking softly on wood her grandmother's hands had once sanded smooth. "Hey, Grandma," she whispered, brushing dust from the railing. "I came home." The wind stirred soft, familiar like a reply. She sat for a while, eyes wandering over the street. Children played where she once stood crying. Their laughter was pure, untouched by the kind of lessons life had taught her too soon. It had been years since anyone had called her the Ranger's daughter. That title had faded, just like the headlines. But sometimes, when she met strangers who recognized her name, she still saw that flicker in their eyes, that echo of the story that had become something bigger than her. The story had changed people, changed policies, changed schools across the country, but to Lily it was never about the world. It was always about one thing: her father. David Crawford had retired 5 years ago. He'd spent his final years working with veterans' families, helping soldiers reconnect with the lives they'd left behind. Quiet work, unnoticed by most. He died the way he lived: calm, honorable, never asking for more than what was right. A heart attack on a morning jog. No drama, just peace. They buried him beside Grace under the oak tree behind the church. The headstone simple, just his name, his rank, and the words, "Rangers lead the way." Beneath that, carved in smaller letters, another line, her addition. "And sometimes they lead home." Lily stood now in front of that headstone, the afternoon sun filtering through branches, painting the grass in gold. "I got your letter back then," she said softly. "The one from Syria. I still keep it in my wallet." She smiled faintly. "I teach now, history. The kids don't know who I am, and that's good. I tell them about people who stood up for what mattered, not about me, but about what I learned from you." A small breeze moved through the trees, carrying the faint scent of earth and old wood. She placed a folded note at the base of the stone. "For teaching me to fight quietly." Behind her, the church bell rang once, slow, deep, like time breathing. She walked toward the school next. It wasn't the same building, but something about the ground still felt charged. The flagpole was newer, taller, surrounded by a small memorial garden. At its center stood a bronze plaque with words she hadn't seen before. "Dedicated to Lily Crawford, whose courage reminded us that silence can be strength." Someone had added a single metal boot beside the flagpole, a ranger's boot, cast in steel. Lily's breath caught. "You hate that, Dad," she whispered, smiling through tears. "You never liked being remembered out loud." A voice came from behind her. He'd probably say it was too shiny. She turned. Standing there was an older man in a faded ranger ball cap, Command Sergeant Major Jerome Banks, retired now but still standing like discipline carved in bone. "Sergeant Major," she said, a little stunned. He smiled, the corners of his eyes folding. "You still remember the rank, good." "I thought you'd be in Georgia," she said. He shrugged. "I was, then I was. Figured I'd check on the only Crawford left worth saluting." She laughed quietly. "You always had a way of making compliments sound like orders." He nodded toward the plaque. "I didn't want to come to the ceremony when they put that up. Didn't like how they turned it into a press event. But today's just quiet enough." They stood in silence for a while. The sound of a flag snapping in the wind filled the space between them. After a moment, Banks spoke again. "Your father used to say something in the field, said it so often it got annoying." "What was it?" He smiled. "He said dignity doesn't shout." Her throat tightened. "He told me that too." Banks looked down at the memorial. "You know, there's something funny about the way history works. People remember the salutes, the uniforms, the spectacle. But the real courage, it's always quiet, always overlooked." Lily nodded slowly. "That's what scares me, that people only remember the noise, not the meaning." He turned to her. "Then keep reminding them." She took a deep breath, looking around at the schoolyard, the kids laughing, the teachers calling names, the flag waving lazily in the wind. "I think I will," she said softly. Banks patted her shoulder, his hand heavy, steady. "Your father would have been proud, not for what you did, but for what you became." She blinked back tears. "He always said you were the one who stopped him from losing his temper that day." Banks chuckled. He was ready to march through those doors with both barrels of righteousness blazing. I told him to trust his silence. Guess it worked. It did, she said, for all of us. He nodded, then stepped back, tipping his hat. Well, I'll let you have your moment. Take care, Miss Crawford. She smiled. You too, Sergeant Major. He walked away slowly, boots crunching gravel, until he disappeared beyond the parking lot. Lily stood there a while longer, until the wind grew softer and the sun began to dip. Before she left, she looked up at the flag, the same pattern of stars her father once saluted, the same symbol that had meant both burden and belonging. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel small beneath it. She just felt enough. That evening, she drove out of town toward the old overlook above the river, the place she and her father used to sit in silence and watch the world exhale. The sun was gone now, leaving streaks of violet across the horizon. The water shimmered below like liquid glass. She stepped out of the car, walked to the edge, and let the wind wrap around her. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she whispered more to herself than anyone. I used to think courage meant being loud, but now I know it's not. It's standing when everyone else looks away. It's forgiving when no one says sorry. It's coming home, even when it hurts. Her voice trembled, but she smiled. You were right, Dad. Dignity doesn't speak. The wind picked up, swirling her hair across her face, as if answering her. It simply acts. She closed her eyes. The sound of the river filled her ears, steady, eternal, like boots still marching somewhere in the distance. And as night settled over Hickory Creek, the stars blinked awake one by one, quiet witnesses to a story that had outlived its noise, a story that had never been about fame or vengeance, but about something simpler. A girl who stood up when standing up mattered. A father who believed silence could be armor. And a world that, for one rare moment, remembered what dignity looked like when it finally stopped shouting. The wind carried the sound of the pines, whispering the same old words to anyone still listening. Rangers lead the way. And somewhere in that stillness, the silence answered back. Home,